in the court. Oyez, oyez. All rise. Stand up if you're listening to this. Ian's. That's a good question. Are we listening to this? Welcome to Pod Casty For Me. The podcast, once again, about film, culture, politics, and Clint Eastwood, where we watch every film directed by and or starring American filmmaker Clint Eastwood and explore how they speak to their moment. And this one, the show is hosted by two guys. I'm one of the guys. My name is Jake Serwin.
I'm one of the guys. My name is Ian Ryan.
Guy number 2.
Yep.
Could be either of us. Him in the order of guys who talked, but I don't want to.
No, I think that's a compliment in this context. Makes me feel like a righteous man.
Manslaughterer. Righteous manslaughterer.
Yeah. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing okay. I just wolfed down my lunch.
Oh, what'd you have?
I had some... Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I had dressed greens. Salad is a bit of a stretch for what that was.
Okay.
I had some roasted potatoes that I microwaved.
Oh.
And I had some pan-seared tofu that I microwaved.
Oof. Now, the searing and the roasting, those happened... Somebody else did that?
By my hand, but earlier in the week.
Recycled. These are upcycled foods.
Just like,
cool.
Yeah, this is prepped.
Okay.
Not even upcycled. This is part of the cycle. This is the first cycle. How about you? What did you have for lunch? People, this episode has been anticipated for 2 years. What did you eat? People
immediately regretting getting their hopes up. I had a little non-wrap. I mean, cue the jokes, people. Come on with this. Guy can't even talk about non-bread.
I also had a non-wrap.
Yeah. Most lunches are non-wrap.
Non-bread, is it or isn't it?
R&B, that's a type of non-wrap.
Yeah. Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
So
it was mushroom. It was a butter mushroom masala inside of a non-bread.
That sounds pretty good.
It was quite good.
We're back to we're doing Clint again. When I press play on the Clint theme, Ian, his eyebrow gave a little flutter, like someone had just started rubbing his shoulders or something. It's like a little nice to hear that.
How it felt. Yeah, I mean, it's not
again. Yeah,
it hasn't been a decade, but it's been a minute.
It has been a little while. Yes. I have a new 2 question, but I'm not going to do it. Well, I'm just going to ask you. Does saying it's been a minute, does that feel like cultural appropriation to you? Because it has to me.
Oh, interesting.
A lot of new slang. Hey, get the
Natalie Portman in here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of new slang to me feels like I'm not supposed to say this because I can tell that it came from African American vernacular English, and that is not a culture that I have.
Definitely the case. Now, here's a situation where I think my aunt says it's been a minute because of my grandma being from Texas, and which it may also have originated in some type of African American vernacular, which is further back.
We're heading on down to the southern United States here on the show. Texas is literally in the southern United States, and whether or not it's part of the South, I think, is a question that could get us harmed. So we won't. Venture into it, but we're talking Juror number 2 today.
To that Garden of Good and Evil once again. We're back.
It's about 2:32 in the Garden of Good and Evil here in Los Angeles. The movie came out. The movie we were waiting for a long time. It came out, and no one could see it, basically, for a long time. It's since been released on VOD, and it's coming to Max pretty soon, so it's just about time that we record the dang thing. What do you think? Should we do the episode?
I think we should go ahead and do the episode. It's more or less widely available at this point. I mean, it's almost as unceremonious as you could get without just going straight to Max from the beginning.
I mean, depending on who you ask, the film was intended as a Max original from the get-go. I would imagine that Clint would not go for that.
I think we've heard evidence to that effect, yes.
And so then you hear the story. This happens, you get this with like Smile or I think John Wick even may have been the case where like test screenings are so strong for a movie they had planned to dump that they're like, shit, should we put this thing out? And then they do, and it does really well to everyone's great shock. A film, like a good movie in a theater, will attract people to see it.
Yeah, not just a good movie. a good movie that is like, maybe I'm showing my age here, but this is the type of movie that's been in theaters for the past 40 years, basically.
Yeah, you could just go to like any group of people over 50 years old and you say, there's another one, finally. Yes. And they'll just come in droves. You'll have to shoo them away with a broom. They'll be standing in the aisles.
The idea of the sort of like
silver.
Lightly more, well, I think it does a good job, but it's not super challenging in terms of philosophical content, but it's ultimately a court movie with some recognizable actors and a question that you can sink your teeth into.
Just a dynamite premise. Just like an insanely good premise.
Yep.
Everyone is doing their darndest. Cast full of heavy hitters.
Mm-hmm.
And you're out of there in like 2 hours.
Yeah. This feels like, look, we're not executives, as we've said many times, but this doesn't feel like a big, brave decision to put this in theaters.
No. And yet, David Zaslav saw fit to just do whatever he liked. Because CEOs can get away with anything. Not anymore. Well, probably still now. I mean, it's never been harder to get access to a CEO's person than it is right now.
Right. I'm sure you saw that headline that was something to the effect of we haven't addressed the problem of healthcare CEOs rising personal protection costs or something, whatever the phrase.
Yeah. Great. So we'll get to all that. And we will certainly talk about jury nullification.
Oh, yeah.
That's something on many lips nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
2 sets of lips. Why, that's enough to ask 2 questions. This is a segment on the show where we ask each other 2 questions and, kick things off. Ian, do you have a 2 question for me today?
I do have a couple 2 questions for you, which is not really how this is supposed to work.
A couple, too.
They're all part of a big question, which is, what have been your experiences buying or selling cars in your life?
God.
Oh, my God.
Interesting. You should mention this. We just went through it recently. My dad is one of those guys who, like, I think one of the family cars, he went to the dealership and he said, this is how much I would like to pay for this car. And they said, we can't do that. And he said, that's great. I got some emails to get to, so if anything changes, let me know. I'll just be sitting here drinking the coffee. And he's like sat in the dealership for like 6 hours or something until they finally knocked.
6 hours.
I mean, that was the story he told me because he's just sitting there with his BlackBerry. He's doing the same thing you do. And I believe they knocked
like his main work,
a few $1,000s off of the
probably same amount that he made in those 6 hours. Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe. And so there's that, and then I don't know. The thing with buying a car is like, I mean, this movie is. I didn't expect going into this film to have it light up also the part of my brain that thinks we should all get rid of the car and never have the car again.
Yeah.
This movie made me so scared to drive.
Here's the thing. You should be scared to drive.
I know. It's been getting really bad at night. But anyway, my famous podcast girlfriend, she recently purchased a car. And it's like, I mean, like with the court system, you're a regular person who has to insert yourself into this vast labyrinthine network of like rules and regulations and codes and customs that you don't understand. You couldn't possibly get up to speed on it.
They're like state specific, and who knows where you bought your car, where the person is coming from, where they're going to take it.
It is, for some reason, illegal in the United States to buy directly from a car manufacturer. I believe that is literally against the law.
Wow.
I mean, I think I read this in a tweet or something, so don't quote me. But like, basically, the dealership, the famous type of salesman that you use as shorthand for an unscrupulous huckster. The car salesman is like enshrined in law.
Wow.
We had a nice lady. She was a nice lady, if you can believe it. Subaru of Glendale has a nice Armenian lady working there.
I can wrap my head around that.
She was and she was saying that my girlfriend reminded her of her daughter, that like we're about the same age as her kids, so like she wants to just like give us the facts and like if we take it, that's great. If not, no harm done.
The soft sell.
She soft sold us, but also like I'm aware that I'm being soft sold. And I'm also not really involved in this, but like they also had this giant like table-sized iPad for the signing of all the million
to be able to track
documents.
Future crimes. Okay.
Yeah, it looks like that, but the FPG had to sign 100,000 things on what looked like one of those. You know when you sit down at the Pac-Man.
Yep.
It was like that, except like a computer with like weird. A pen.
Very weird. Okay.
And the guy can hit buttons and it like flips the whole document around.
One of those things where the marginal utility of it is extremely unclear to me.
Well, I mean, this guy
probably
does
cost like $1,800 or something.
This is the only place where I think this piece of equipment should exist, because this guy has to show somebody like 18 documents in a row,
the same 18
have them read and sign, and then he has to flip the document around to see it himself. And this is his whole job all day, as people come into this room and they sign a bunch of documents. So like, it actually makes sense to me.
Does it? How different is it from just having iPad?
Because it's easier to use because you can sign it with like a pen, and also you can both read it at the same time. It's big.
Okay.
I don't know. So anyway, that was buying the car. We bought the car. It turned out fine, I think. But also like
one of those things you can't really feel that confident about.
Yeah. And yeah, so that was my experience buying a car. You don't have a car.
Don't have a car. Happy that I don't.
I've never known you to have. You've never owned a car.
Yourself. I have been in possession of cars that my parents have loaned me. And then also when I was living in New York, my ex-girlfriend had a car that I was mostly in charge of, and we sold it to a couple who lived in New Jersey.
Is this a Prius?
This is a Prius, yes.
So you sold the car over state lines. Was that a problem?
Well, it didn't become a problem. I was certainly scared about it at the time because I was trying to figure... Right. One specific state line. And we're talking about like...
you sold it to Delaware.
10 miles. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we went out to a nice meal with the people who wanted to buy it, and they seemed
wow. This is
normal.
Like medieval.
I guess. Yeah.
It's like you're joining the houses.
The guy was like a real, like a yoga type of a guy, which is fine. And I don't mean, there's lots of people who do yoga, and then there's like...
a car I would like to.
Yes. Master yoga. Yeah. And then they took it and they looked at it and they said, okay, that looks pretty good. And then they paid for it and everything turned out fine. But in terms of being afraid of cars, I was driving a car in Mexico not that long ago, and I checked over my shoulder, checked the blind spot, changed lanes. Must have been less than 3 feet from killing a guy on a moped who was coming up behind and whose lights were just indistinguishable from the street lights. And this man honked at me and he had every right. I was truly like, we're going to talk about moral luck. I was a bit of moral luck away from being a manslaughterer, and I don't think I did anything wrong. I think I did all the things that you're supposed to do, and that's how easy it is to kill somebody in a car.
Yep. We'll talk about all this. There's also, another bit of like you and I just constantly flagellating ourselves for being alive. The fact of you go to the car dealership or the car reseller or whatever, and they'll take your old car, and that knocks some of the price off of the new car. And then you think, they're going to sell that to somebody else. Right. And so my car that I have decided is no longer worth having at all is going to be someone else's new car.
Yeah. And that's still somehow a better option than public transport. And I'm not mocking those people. I am mocking the public transport system.
Oh, yeah. We've said this on the show, but as of at least a few years ago, the like stretch goal, the big...
in Los Angeles.
Big, bright, shining aspiration of the LA Metro Board was to get to someday a place where the average public transit trip is merely twice as long as the same trip in a car. So...
That's exactly right.
And also, I don't even know what the solution would be for medium rural Savannah area.
Yeah, that's very tough.
What do we do? Sidewalks, probably.
That's a good start for sure. Yep. Make it an option to do something else.
Yes.
You got a question for me?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I have a question for you. You have to, because of, whatever imperative reason makes sense for you. But I don't owe you anything.
Okay.
You got to get a tattoo on your neck, the size of the tattoo on James Scythe's neck, so you can't reasonably cover it up with clothing. It's going to be popping out about the size of, let's say, the mouth of a coffee mug or something.
Yeah, sure.
What you getting on there? What
kind
of tattoo?
Coffee mug shaped tattoo of a muscular human neck, attractive human neck.
As you age. So wait, is it the full neck? Is it like the Steve-O sort of recursive? There's a full neck on your neck?
No. It's a coffee mug shaped section of my neck in the best possible shape.
Just trying to think how they would even apply that. Like, how would you make it? Because you're doing like a trompe l'oeil. I don't speak French, but
I'm doing an eye trick, an eye trap.
Steve Jobs got us with one of those. Okay, that's a good answer.
Besides that, I don't know. I'm a guy. I've wanted a tattoo for probably 7 years.
You have wanted a tattoo?
Yeah, I've wanted not a specific, just a tattoo for 7 years.
This is
I think
something
tattoos
you
are
could
cool.
Easily take care of.
Absolutely. But this is a boring thing that people say all the time.
You save 50 cents a day starting 7 years ago. You got yourself a real nice tattoo.
Oh, yeah. Really nice. But I'm not a consistent man. I'm not a man who, I like something I pride myself on, and something that's maybe just a consequence of my crippled mind, my decaying mind, I should say. So I don't know. I don't know anything that I would like well enough to really want something there, but I think tattoos are great. And I think James Scythe's character was, I knew he was innocent the second he walked into that courtroom. Cool.
I don't like the neck tattoo. I don't have a problem with tattoos generally, but there are a number of places where I think the tattoo does not flatter the wearer.
It also limits your options. I do think most tattoos are best served by being able to be covered up depending on the circumstance.
Yeah, just so you can decide what type of part of yourself you want to project.
Exactly.
So I would get on my neck your social security number. I think I've made this joke before. Haven't I?
Some variation of it, yeah.
Okay. I would get QR code.
Oh, wow.
QR code, go to freaking Rickroll video.
Somebody bringing their phone up to your neck and then you're excited about it for some reason.
I'll punish them for doing that weird thing. Yeah, freaking Rickroll is so funny, dude. When you trick somebody, you make them see the song that's fine.
That's right. That's a really good move.
Thanks. It's time to talk about the movie. And we used to do a thing here on the show where we would tell people where they could watch the movie. And I think we should do it again.
Okay.
Juror number 2, film directed by Clint Eastwood. New guy to me. Not familiar with much of his work. Released November 1st, 2024, ostensibly, technically.
If you were lucky.
I'm currently wearing the Screen Slate Juror number 2 concert t-shirt that the folks over there at the Screen Slate website put together. And it's got on the back, like the locations of a concert tour, it's got every theater in North America that showed Juror number 2 that opening weekend. I believe it was something like...
And the font's not that small.
30 to 50, yeah. And so if you were lucky, if you lived in a few major metropolitan areas, you could have seen this film. I was speaking with a number of listeners to the show, friends of the show, who their only opportunity to see the film theatrically was to drive 5 to 6 hours and then I guess find somewhere to stay. I don't know.
Right.
So, and there was no, they don't tell you when the film's going to come out on VOD. I think part of that is to get people to go see it in theaters, but when you can't.
Yeah.
So, but now it's on VOD. So you can find it Amazon, Fandango at home.
Oh.
Mother, can we buy movie tickets online? No, we have Fandango at home. Plex, Spectrum, and of course Apple TV.
Very good. Oh, wow.
That's here in the States. But if someone was down in Mexico, which is where Ian lives, where Ian recently nearly took the life of a moto scooterist.
Moto scooterist, yeah.
Where would you watch it?
Okay. If you were here in Mexico, you would find it on Claro Video, or you'd find it on Apple TV.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because my understanding is that they have a different name for it down there. They call it Manzana TV. Is that true? What I heard?
It's true. That's your understanding. Yes.
I read that in La Opinión.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hope you didn't.
Los Angeles area Spanish language newspaper. Is that true? Is it just LA, or is it like the whole US? La Opinión it is like a Chicano or like Mexican American paper. Yes?
It is. Yeah. It's as far as I know, it's just an LA thing. Could be extremely wrong about that, but I think it's like your classic kind of weirdly progressive on some things and then extremely conservative on other things type of like newspaper. Independent journalism.
We love it. This is a film directed by Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
Written by Jonathan Abrams. First produced screenplay by Jonathan Abrams. He his previous to this, his main credit, or his biggest credit, was as a producer on the film Escape Plan, the Stallone Schwarzenegger team up from
of course
2011 or something. We'll get into that. It was shot by Yves Belanger.
Yep.
Who had shot The Mule and Richard Jewell prior to this. French-Canadian guy. Music by Mark Mancina, who did the music for Cry Macho before this. Edited by longtime Clint Eastwood editor Joel Cox.
And
his son David Cox.
Yeah, new generation.
Yep. And this script was written, I believe, like 10 years ago. Jonathan Abrams says that he has a friend who is the youngest Superior Court judge in California. Whoa. I think this might be Victor Pippins Jr., but I'm not sure about that. But it may be Vic Pip. So we'll figure that out. But before that, he was a prosecutor, and he went to like just observe voir dire for his friend's case, and the judge wasn't letting anybody talk their way out of serving. This is from an interview that Abrams gave to GQ.
Okay.
And I said to myself silently, what could you say to this judge right now that would get you kicked off? Your Honor, I can't serve on the jury because I perpetrated the crime. And I laughed. He laughed at his own observation. I'm like, that's a monster. That's the hook. That's amazing. So he had this idea. Yeah. And then he sort of hitches it to 12 Angry Men, which is the kind of classic, the classic jury film, and adds this new wrinkle to it. And it goes through a number of different forms, and he adds things to it to make it more commercial. This interview is pretty interesting because he talks about how when you have like a premise this strong, this immediately just gripping, every executive that you bring it to has their own idea about where it should go.
Whoa, okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And so he's constantly having, because he kind of wants it to remain about the moral quandary rather than just become a thriller about.
Yeah. Happy to hear that. And I think it succeeded in that regard.
Yeah, I think so too. And so he says that when he sent it to Clint, when Clint got attached to it in around about 2022, he said, like, this is Abrams quoting Clint. I see what you see. In fact, I can tell where you've tried to do things to the script to make it seem more pulpy or big or commercial, and we're going to strip all that out. So Clint wanted to take any of the extra pulpy stuff and strip it back down to the bare bones of the story. And I think that's one of the strongest things about the movie.
I think so too. I mean, this is a match made in heaven for me. This is the moment. We don't have to keep saying we're going to talk about this when we talk about Juror number 2. We have discussed like maybe four Clint Eastwood films that are perfect tee-ups for this film.
This is fucking catnip. I came out of this movie feeling insane. Someone in the movie says the word podcast.
Yes.
I'm thinking like he's talking to me.
Well, he doesn't just say the word podcast, or she doesn't just say the word podcast. She's talking about true crime podcasts, which we talked about on the episode about his film, True Crime.
True crime. Yeah. Yes. We don't like true crime podcasts, but we did do one true crime podcast.
And we talked about in that podcast how within those podcasts, there's a sort of weird dual element of being like extremely interested in solving cases and in that way looking at the world through this criminalizing lens, but also being kind of police skeptical sometimes. And guess what?
Both films, Francesca Eastwood is injured by a carelessly operated four-wheeled conveyance.
That's true. It's very true.
You got the Speed Zoo and True Crime, and here Speed kills.
Medium speed kills.
Yes. So... Man, I mean, this is crazy. I texted you when I came out because I saw it in the theater.
You did. I
texted
jealous.
you. I didn't want to give anything away, except I believe I said like we could go for 5 hours on this.
Right, it's true.
I mean, I don't know what was your response? What was it like for you watching this movie?
Yeah, I mean, disappointingly, I did have to watch it on home video. Watched it on Amazon at home.
Clamshell VHS.
Yes. And I think it's a tremendous success. It wasn't my very favorite film of the year, but anybody I know who put it in their top 10, to me, that's like, I have no questions for that person. It makes perfect sense to me. There's no need for a follow-up because there's so many appealing things to me. I think it is mostly making really classic late stage Clint choices about the same humanization we've talked about for like almost 70 episodes, I think. And then applying that in kind of a somewhat formally challenging way. Not super challenging, but in a way that I think does enhance the basic Clint interests. So, achieves that stylistically. And then in a step that's a little bit different than, I'm going to say everything except 15, 17, and maybe Letters. It's the only film that I really think ends on like a question, kind of, which I think is unusual for Clint. I mean, there's lots of films that are maybe not fully resolved, but to me, the film does end on a kind of a question. We'll get to the end, I'm sure. But
what's interesting is that in an interview with Indiewire, Abrams talks about how a huge film for him as like a younger cinema interested guy was Mystic River.
Wow. Okay.
And that he saw that when he was writing this, he had like sort of the tone or some of the ideas of Mystic River in mind. And he thought this is like a companion to Mystic River.
It was much more interesting than Mystic River.
It's so much more interesting. Although I do see a little bit of what he's getting at in terms of that movie is about guilt and like
about your past coming to bear and like,
the past coming to bear, and also like who's culpable when hurt people,
right.
vampires, all of this.
Quite good.
Yeah. So, and the main guy is tall, and let's see, anything else related?
Kind of I would say they share a like a backdrop of classic American families that are being undermined on screen.
Yep, and I think Mystic River has got a lot more of the kind of broadly sketched troubled family, whereas this one, I think one of the many strengths of this film is how regular, how like realistically doing their best the central family is, and also everyone in the film. I mean, I think it's hard for me to say whether this is my top film of the year, because it's like asking me if like my birthday party was the birthday party of the year. It's like, I don't know. It's like
made for me.
I have a special diseased relationship to this movie.
Right, of course.
I do think it's very strong. And from the get-go, like the opening of the film, we cut from an image of blind Justice to Zoe Deutsch with a blindfold, and she's being led into to a room that turns out to be a freshly decorated nursery for the baby that's coming. And the nursery, first of all, reminded me so much of the famous scene from American Sniper with the baby doll.
Yeah, I could see that.
But also, it's like a regular nursery. Like, it looks cute. But it looks like if you told me they had Nicholas Hoult like decorate this nursery himself,
right,
like as a method thing, I'd believe you. But she's reacting to it the way that a real person would.
Which she's like excited, but she doesn't scream and yell and go over the top. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also, it looks like it's got the stuff in it that like this guy could probably afford, It's so once you have this like, 90s Grisham or like Clint in his airport paperback era kind of premise, but then mixed with added to that the later Clint, not even kitchen sink, but like Wendy's drive-through realism.
Sure. Yeah.
That you get from, movies, I would say like some of American Sniper and then
Richard
Onward.
Jewell and was it Will Sloan that we quoted from his piece?
Yeah, the piece about how Clint is showing the America where there's a recruiting station across the street from a Robex or a Jamba Juice or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we get
across the parking lot.
Right. We get a like mule style backyard party very, very early on, right after that nursery reveal. And there's like a little hint of darkness, which you could also say, I guess, is a bit of Mystic River. And then I really appreciated the darkness in their life turns out to be not minor. I'm certainly not minimizing anybody who's had a traumatic miscarriage to spoil it a little bit, but it's not
that
like
and the alcoholism.
Right.
But these are like real problems people have that you can,
and not just like
work
some
through.
People have that, like a huge percentage of people have one of those problems in their life, or they know somebody who has one of those problems in their life. It's like beyond ubiquitous. The
kinds of things that if they destroy their relationship, you would totally understand, but also plenty of people find ways to work through and be enriched by, or like have, find a deeper connection on the other side of these things by working through them. And like, yeah, it's such an interesting like fusion of pulp Clint and late style 15, 17 Clint,
And here's another huge compliment to throw at him. It takes the premise of 12 Angry Men, a film I think you and I both love. Is that
good movie?
Safe to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All timer. And it somehow makes the characters, like all of the jury members, even less of caricatures. Like they're even more.
They have less time. Because 12 Angry Men famously
the entire
stays
thing
in the room.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And yet, I think you were talking about everyone being like their motives being comprehensible. I would argue that it tries to make them even more comprehensive. It tries to make, I mean, to put it in simple terms, there's no like the bigot character in there. There's certainly some stand-ins for sure, but there's no character that we can just say like, okay, well, I don't like that person because it's clear that they're doing this for this reason that I think is reprehensible.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. Let's very quickly describe the film because everyone who is listening to this and wants to see the movie has already seen it, but we'll just recap it for you.
Yeah. Quick question I have for you. So I knew the basic premise. It was a twist to me that Nicholas Hoult's character didn't know when I knew that it was him. I didn't know that he didn't know that it was him.
I knew from the trailer that he would, my assumption from the trailer is that he would never know for sure.
Okay. Never saw
the movie makes it quite clear that he did it like 20 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
Which is refreshing because, they're not wringing like that kind of tension despite the fact that we know how movies work out of it. Yeah. Like you just find out. So
let's do it.
Plot sum. So Justin Kemp is a man with a pregnant wife, high risk pregnancy. She miscarried twins. He's worried about getting. He's worried about this. He gets a jury summons. He goes to the jury selection. He tries to get out of it by saying, "My wife has a high risk pregnancy," and the judge is like, "Where are you going to go to your job?" And he said yes. And she's like, "Well, this will take
we'll get you home by 5
amount of time.
Yeah,
we'll come back to this." Okay. But so he gets picked for the jury. The trial turns out to be a homicide trial where a man with a past, like a violent past, a gang involved past, is on trial for the death of his girlfriend, played by Francesca Eastwood. They have a public argument at a bar. She storms off. He follows after her in the rain. That's the last anybody ever sees of them. And then her bludgeoned body is found at the bottom, in a creek over the edge of a bridge, not far from Rowdy's Hideaway, the roadhouse where this took place. And Nick Holt's character Justin Kemp realizes Rowdy's Hideaway. That's where I went to order a drink and not touch it on the anniversary or on the due date of my miscarried twin children.
Yep.
And that was the night where in a heightened emotional state, I was driving home in the rain and I hit a deer, I think, and just kept going. And so he realizes, not only do I not think this guy did it, I think I did it.
Yes, I think it's fairly likely that I did it. And then the more that he looks into it, the more it seems to become clear, like you said, that he did do it. And in fact,
he did do it. Yes.
The complications come in a couple forms. First of all, he sort of investigates, feels like all the signs point to him doing it. He goes because, like you said, he's a recovering alcoholic. So he goes to talk to his sponsor, Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes,
and
Kiefer Sutherland, who is looking like when they do try to do like a realistic Frankenstein.
Okay.
He's had some rough work.
He's had some rough work and probably just age. And I don't think it takes away from his potency as an actor, but it is.
No. He doesn't look like the guy from Stand By Me or even the guy from 24. He looks like, you know what he really looks like is an AA sponsor.
Yes.
Who is also a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. A fairly wealthy guy who's maybe recovered from alcoholism. So in that sense, well cast. And Justin Kemp goes to him as a lawyer and says, like, I think I may have killed this guy. Can I come forward and say that this was me? And he says, I'm going to be straight with you. You have multiple priors for DUIs. You wrapped your car around a tree. You were leaving a bar. There's no way that the DA won't charge you with some type of like aggravated secondary homicide, probably.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the movie's whole like central conflict is the incompatibility between truth, like the truth, and what's possible, what passes for justice in the criminal justice system.
Yeah,
in the
what
court
would
system.
serve all the people involved best, presumably. And there is kind of like an assumption, which I think is a generous assumption on Clint's part or on Abrams' part, which is like we all want the best for these people, more or less, or the best that's available to them. But the question becomes like, what configuration would even allow for that? Is there a configuration that even allows for that? And
so in the jury deliberations, Holt's character is the stand-in for the Henry Fonda character in 12 Angry Men. He is the one juror who does not immediately think that the accused is guilty.
With the twist that in Henry Fonda's case, it's just because he says like, well, I had a lot of questions that I feel like the defense attorney didn't really address.
And this man deserves some
time. And in Nicholas Holt's case, it's because he knows that he probably did it. So
But I do think there's also an element of I think part of what's so gnarly about the situation is that he doesn't just think. Like, if he wanted to get away with it, he would just say, I think the guy's guilty, too. Like, part of him wants justice for James Scythe. Yeah.
He's in a unique position because he has unfair access to information, which is that James Scythe, the character of the Gabriel Basso, how do you say his name?
Basso. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Mr. Night Agent from Netflix's The Night Agent.
Well, you know who else he is?
Who else is he?
He's J.D. Vance in Hillbilly Elegy.
He is J.D. Vance. Yeah, that's a real bummer.
Yeah.
But Justin Kemp knows or is pretty close to being sure that he didn't do it, which means that he can sort of like see the holes in the prosecutor's case, specifically because he has this unique vantage point. Whereas like everybody else,
I would love to ask you this question because I thought this during the film.
Okay.
But also, like, my parents are lawyers, but they're not this kind of lawyer. They're not like criminal lawyers.
Yeah.
And also, I've just watched a lot of TV and movies and stuff. This seems like a dog shit case. They've got very little. They saw the guy follow her, and that's it. Like, there's no...
Well...
everyone in the jury acts like... or everyone, like, you know, I think the film wants us to think that it's like wrapped up tight, but to me, it's all they have is supposition. Like, they don't have anything to connect.
It is largely circumstantial, but there's a couple compounding factors. Some of them I think are connected to 12 Angry Men very directly. But also, like you're saying, we have J.K. Simmons' character, who's on the jury, who is revealed to be a former cop. But he basically says...
In the theater, I do have to say, this movie played like fucking gangbusters.
Oh, yeah,
and when he put his badge down, people were like Arsenio hooting and like pumping their fists and stuff.
Hell yeah. I mean,
yeah.
So what he says is the kid should have taken a plea bargain. And he reveals his position to be that he's not sure if the kid's guilty, but what he thinks is that the case against him was strong enough. And this reveals something else about the justice system that I'm sure we're going to get to, which is that the vast majority of trials don't go, or the vast majority of cases don't go to trial. Mm-hmm. And that is because either they are, I think it's about 90% of cases that are like brought to a serious point, people plead guilty to. And then something like 8% of cases, it's thrown out because there's not enough evidence, or the court doesn't think it's worth their time. So he's right in saying that probably there's enough evidence here, because what you're omitting is that there was an eyewitness, supposedly.
He's sort of a combination of the two eyewitnesses in 12 Angry Men.
Yes. He is a lonely old man who is happy to be a part of something, which is like a really big, nice moment in 12 Angry Men. I love that speech.
Yeah. And he sees his testimony in 12 Angry Men. There's like a downstairs neighbor. There's an old guy downstairs who claims that he heard the accused yell, "I'm going to kill you," and then heard like a thump.
And then went to his door and saw the kid run downstairs.
Saw the kid running down the stairs. Yeah. And then at the same moment, there's a woman across the street, like a middle-aged woman, who claims that she saw the murder take place through the windows of a passing L train.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so here they're sort of fused into an old man who sees through the rain from like a couple hundred feet, I think, a guy get out of he claims he sees James Scythe get out of his car, and like after the alleged murder has taken place. Yeah. And then just like in 12 Angry Men, and in a film that we watched, was it True Crime? Isn't there? Let me see. I think it's Michael Jeter. I remember this scene very clearly, but I don't remember what movie it's in. What scene? It's True Crime. He's a witness in True Crime who basically admits to Clint's character, like, the
guy that he goes to have lunch with, you mean?
The guy he goes to have lunch with, exactly, who admits, like,
I knew this guy was guilty. I could just see it.
Yeah, and I liked I liked the attention, and I felt like I was doing something for society, even if I'm lying, but like the guy seems guilty or whatever.
Yeah. So the other dimension that juror number 2 has, which is not in 12 Angry Men, and I think both are good choices, is that Toni Collette, in the Great Reunion that we discussed on our Patreon episode about the juror and About a Boy. Yeah. She is playing Faith Killebrew. Is she the actual DA? She's running for DA. Is she running for?
She's running for re-election, I believe. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So she is the DA.
The film is also, one of the other conflicts is about the conflict between the faith that your wife puts in you or your desire to drink the killer brew.
I saw it 1 second before it hit me, like a oncoming train.
An oncoming really Toyota 4Runner. Yeah.
Yes, precisely. So yeah, she is this prosecuting attorney. First of all, she's motivated by her desire to get reelected. This is like a big case. It's in the local news. It involves a guy who's connected to some gang activity. She sort of relates it, or maybe the media has already related it to questions about abuse of women, domestic violence, these types of things. So she has a lot invested in winning the case, and she is sort of paired, or like sitting, across the courtroom from Chris Messina, who was her like a student in law school with her.
Yeah, this is a classic legal thriller thing that also it's reminds me of like heroic bloodshed films from Hong Kong, where the two street
Yeah,
urchins
yeah.
grow up, and one of them's a
Yep.
crime boss, and the other one's a cop. But here they're two like idealistic law students, and one becomes a public defender, and the other one gets successful, and they go out for drinks, and he's, you know, the public defender one will say like, "I hope you're happy," or like, what would our favorite professor have said about this?
Yes. And look, man, I don't know. I thought these scenes on paper could have gone wrong so easily.
Yeah.
But because they come off as, first of all, she will sort of like needle him about saying, well, how do you feel representing people who most of the time you know are guilty? And look, we had our friend, my friend Chris Alfonso on in our first season.
Yep.
And he has talked to me as an advocate for mostly juveniles who are possibly entering the carceral system about how it feels to know that a lot of the people you are working with maybe committed some type of crime. And yet, if you have any type of like structural analysis, that you know that that's not enough to summarize what the situation is. But it is still confusing because a lot of the time it's true that you're not trying to argue that they didn't do the thing that they are being brought to court for, but you are trying to make people understand, why is that the end of the conversation? Why is that the only thing we're going to talk about? So I think he sort of brings up, well, first of all, he's like, yeah, a lot of the people I represent are guilty. I don't think this kid's guilty, first of all. Second, like, do you think you did your prosecutorial duty in investigating this? It does sort of like imply the thing that I think we all agree on, which is that prosecutors are a type of cop, and they hold a responsibility to figure out like what the situation is or what is correct, and they often don't fulfill that responsibility.
So, Kemp's Conundrum, which was the working title of the film. I'm glad they changed it. It would have made even less money. Kemp's Conundrum is that if he does the right thing in terms of telling the truth, he will effectively like abandon his wife and children. He will probably end up sentenced to life imprisonment. I think it's the legal term.
Or at least a significant stretch. We can't say for sure, but so he will then have like been honest, but truly destroyed the life of a person that he cares very deeply about and a baby. Yep.
If he lies, he will do a disservice to this stranger, James Scythe, and he will also be giving basically like false closure to the parents of the Francesca Eastwood character, the victim, who and then have to live with the anxiety of being found out for the rest of his life while trying to be a good husband and father.
Yep.
And I don't think the film gives us an answer about which one is better. And I think the film also, long story short, he's holding out. He gets a bunch of people to come around to flip.
And so, we get the 12 Angry Men arc of him making these arguments, not of like, I know this guy's innocent, but like, I have a bunch of questions. He frames the questions.
Right.
J.K. Simmons' cop gets involved. And then so sort of people come around, but there's one absolute holdout who says like, I will never change my mind. Cedric Yarborough's character. Who,
a lot of people have pointed this out, including someone who Yarborough responded to on Twitter the other day, but he has a famous line in the film Black Dynamite where he says, I sell drugs to the community. And in this film, he says like, we have to stop people selling drugs to the community. Like he's just come full circle. But I think he's basically the stand-in for the Lee J. Cobb character in 12 Angry Men, but with less personal animus. Like he has a good point too. I mean, he this is a guy who volunteers with the Boys and Girls Club.
His younger brother was caught up in gang, but I mean, I will say that is one of the only points that doesn't totally track, but in a way that feels like sometimes real people don't totally, their logic doesn't track. But
yeah, I mean, I work at a nonprofit and I have met this guy a bunch of times.
The type of guy who's like, look, I hate gangs because they like get these kids involved, but not making the like final connection.
Some of those kids then grow up to be
right. Your brother would have maybe been this guy also.
Well, and also I understand his frustration at like government inaction or like the structural changes are not being made to reroute people from this kind of behavior, and also to eliminate the like suffering and the deprivation that would entice someone to, like, would make the gang life enticing. Like, if everybody has all their needs met, why would you join a gang? So that option is off the table, and so he sees some sort of measure of action that he can take on this jury by like putting one guy away, and it feels like a drop in the bucket, but also the bucket is bone dry. And so I get it, but he can tell something's up with Kemp.
He just thinks that it's like, oh, you have some type of you're like emotionally upset, and I don't know what's going on with you. I don't think he ever suspects that. I mean, we are meant to sort of have some tension about, is he going to discover
which
that Kemp is...
I like, because I think in a lesser version of this film, he would somehow make this impossible leap and figure it out himself. Whereas like,
he makes the much more statistically likely leap, which is like,
of like, you've got some other shit you're working on, and like you have a reason to not want to find this guy guilty that is not related to justice. It's related to like your own problem. And he never flips, and I think it's totally like believable for how people work. There's
but obviously this ruins Justin Kemp's only like honorable plan, which is to get this guy off by convincing the rest of the jury members.
Sutherland tells him he needs a verdict. He can't just get a mistrial or a hung jury, because then they'll try the case again and they'll look for new evidence, and it will almost definitely point to him. So like, he needs to wrap this up here, which is a great bit of dramatic tension added to the movie. And then J.K. Simmons' character has done some investigating of his own, which gets him kicked off the jury, but it also lights a bit of it tickles Toni Collette's nose with a little feather, and she starts looking into, did I prosecute this enough? Were we blinded by just thinking we had the guy?
I don't know if we ever get like direct confirmation that he was physically abusive to her, but we know that he is a like semi-reformed, possibly reformed gang member, and that they were frequently in domestic like disputes, emotional domestic disputes.
And I think the film does a really great job of illustrating how the same relationship can look loving or abusive depending on like where in the bar you're sitting.
Yeah, or like which day. The film also does some Rashomon stuff, but here's where the version of Clint Subtle is like to do some Rashomon stuff that is very clear, but nobody ever says like, well, your perspective's totally different than mine or something.
I think technically the first time Clint has shot this many takes of a scene, because he had to shoot
these different
perspectives.
That's a great point.
So she starts looking into things. She starts zeroing in on the fact that, hold on, there was a car with the body damage consistent with somebody who hit a large animal on Old Quarry Road on October 25th. They had it fixed. They didn't report it. And then through, a little bit of kind of cutesy, like, oh, she didn't change her last name, irony.
Yes.
She goes and talks to Holt's wife, Zoe Deutsch, and she said, oh, my husband hit a deer with his car on Brimstone Pass. Yeah. That's what I say when they ask me which way I want to go. I'll say I'll take the Brimstone Pass. I'll go harp. Harp direction.
Yeah.
Although, do they have the donut eating thing from The Simpsons when Homer went to hell?
So I would worth consideration. Sure.
Yeah. She realizes, oh, there's a guy on the jury whose car may have hit and killed this lady, but then we don't even really see this. He just like gives in and like.
Well, these are the uncertainties. First of all, Zoe Deutsch's character also effectively figures out that it was probably her husband. She never has full confirmation, but there's a confrontation moment where she says, you took Brimstone Pass, right? And he says like, well, I took Old Quarry Road. I went to go, I bought a drink. I didn't drink it. And then
she does the very realistic, like from I'm not an alcoholic, but I am close to people who have been in programs, and like I have heard a lot of people's. This is very consistent, I think, with the Anon type of partner, and also just like the kind of language you hear in a program, which is,
Like,
why
if you
would I
lied-
believe you?
Yeah. If you lied about part of it, why would I believe some other part of it?
Which is sort of like this mirror version of what Kiefer Sutherland's character says about, there's no jury in the world that would believe you, even if it's true.
Yeah.
And like
it's a mirror version of a lot of court cases, which is, at least on film, there's a certain amount of prosecutorial advance, which is just prove that they lied about something or that they were bad in some way. And that's enough to show that probably they were bad in this other way also.
Right. Ultimately, it's about sort of like arriving at something that is adjacent to, but wholly distinct from the truth. Yeah. Like it's not total. The truth doesn't really matter. It doesn't come into this. It's kind of like, this is the most embarrassing analogy I've ever come up with in a podcast full of exclusively embarrassing analogies. Uh-huh. But the legal system to me kind of reminds me of whenever, like right before they have to do one of those big canon resets in comic books, where there's just so much continuity. There's so many conflicting things that have been like resolved around one another. It's all so intertwined that it's totally inscrutable from like, it's no longer related to what was originally there. And I feel like the court system on paper is kind of, it's got some interesting tricks going on in it when you look at it from an 8th grade civics class perspective. But because of the practical application of all these things as like people's jobs and like the way that it all has to work in and around the lives that people live and the market capital system, like it's just not related to getting at truth or justice at all anymore. And like Spider-Man hasn't talked about his aunt for 10 years because he's like, there was a clone of him that they like got married or something. And it's like, what is going on? He has a kid?
Yeah.
And the kid is like the Hulk now?
Yep. And that's the only way that somehow it resolves this fight between Spider-Man and the Hulk that's been happening for 3 years in this run of comics.
Then the clone has to come in and like sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, I don't care that guy sacrificed himself because like he's ultimately a new character. And then you think about, well, he's been like the main love interest for like 15 years, but I don't care.
Yes.
And then they attach Roman Polanski to make the movie that's just about the Spider-Man clone, but Spider-Man can't be in it.
Right.
All right. Anyway,
belongs to like Legacy Pictures or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So Amy Pascal come on the show.
Yeah. So
she starts to figure this out, but then the trial resolves itself. She no longer like thinks that Scythe is the guy, but it's extremely clear that a guilty verdict is going to decide this election for her. And like Kemp's whole thing is like the movie is basically about like who gets to be innocent.
Yeah, and before we get to that sort of penultimate conversation that they have, I think the tiny bit of fantasy for me is that she would continue to care this much, which maybe that's my cynicism, is that
sure.
This newly elected and confirmed DA would have enough principled values to be able to say, you know what?
Yep.
I'm gonna throw this all away because I want to know the truth. That's the reason that I got involved in this in the first place. Is because
based on what I know about like human behavior, I think anyone who has even a molecule of that kind of concern for what is really true ends up as the public defender.
Yep. I think so too. Would never have arrived at being the DA. I agree.
Yeah.
So setting that aside, they have a little conversation where she's now pretty sure that it was him based on this car stuff and the fact that he was the only jury member to show up for the sentencing hearing, just like to see what happened. He was, like in tears.
This guy's clearly like, thinking about stuff.
So they have a sit outside, and this is the moment where basically they say what you were just talking about, where they have a discussion where he says like, what is justice? If I am about to become a father or somebody is about to become a father, they made a mistake, that it won't bring this person back. Like, what is the goal, basically? And I mean, what's effective about this to me is
sometimes truth isn't justice.
Yes. Which what he's saying is not identical to what you said, but is effectively saying like, look, even if you prosecute me, like what is being achieved? So he is sort of questioning the entire justice system as it exists in the United States.
So I want to read to you something that Jonathan Abrams said to IndieWire,
Okay.
which is a really good reminder of the death of the author.
All right, sure.
And he tells IndieWire, I wrote it as a timeless ode to 12 angry men, not realizing that the importance of civil discourse would be greater than ever in 2024. Being able to look at a system that may not work the way you want it to, but is still the best system we've got, is something I hope people could take away from the movie. Which is insane, because I think this movie is about how the American system is fundamentally broken forever and is totally incompatible with arriving at truth or justice.
Well, this is what I meant when I was saying I think the film ends on a question. I will say, I don't want to speak for her because I didn't ask her full opinion, but my girlfriend was sucked into this like, this is like honey to a person who just enjoys lots of types of film, but just in general, I would say like well-made films that are asking interesting questions. And I told her ahead of time, I was like, I think you might like this one. She said, I had a long day at work. I don't know if I really feel like watching a movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 5 minutes into me watching the movie, she was just like totally in on it. I mean, she watched the entire thing. First of all,
yeah. Nicole.
Oh, yeah.
Looking guapo, so.
Oh, yeah. He's doing,
I think, incredible work where so much of the performance is merely in his eyes and facial expressions. But sorry, I stepped on you.
No. I totally agree. He does a wonderful job. I think it would have been so easy to under or overact this, and I think hits the tone for this film perfectly.
Also, I think both him and Toni Collette, just such a daring decision to do an accent that's not your own on a Clint Eastwood movie where you get one take.
Right.
Really, really quite something.
We've seen the fallout of this in your Invicta,
yeah.
Yeah.
God, imagine if there was a sequel.
God, yeah. So, anyway, she didn't like
investigating whether Mandela died in prison. He falls into like a number 23 hole.
Anyway, I think I understood completely where she was coming from, because I think there is a bit of an on-screen suggestion that, is this like the right thing? Is this actually the criminal justice system functioning as it? I mean, I don't think it's like totally contrary. I don't think Abrams is crazy for thinking this about his movie. But I do think that, to me, obviously, the much more interesting thing is that at no point did we ever feel like there was a turn where we said, oh, yeah, he deserves this somehow. They don't give an inch in that direction.
No.
It is totally confirmed. In fact, I think the film is almost cruel in emphasizing how much he has reformed, how much... Right.
He's exactly the same. I mean, and Holt makes this case to the rest of the jurors. Like, I'm a guy who changed. I wrapped my car around a tree 4 years ago. I haven't had a drink of alcohol since. Like, I've put my life together, and I met this woman gave me a chance to change, and I did, and I owe her my life. And Scythe says, like, I've done things in my past that I deeply regret, but I'm not that guy anymore, and I didn't do this. And
his speech is like a great Isaiah Washington level role where he says, I thought I was doing really good. And it got me. I was like, what else can you hope for yourself except when you've made mistakes to say, like, I hope in the future I'm doing some things that I feel better about. And that's what he's doing.
Right. And like, I mean, like you with the sliding doors motorcyclist, like Holt wasn't drinking. Yeah. He was emotionally upset, and it was nighttime and like raining. Second. He just notices that his phone went off. He didn't even touch the phone.
Yep, I like that.
And like, so he doesn't break any of the laws. He's operating. This is just one of the risks of operating a car.
Yeah, particularly at night in the rain, like you're saying.
Yeah, and so like, what do we gain from locking this person up? Like, this is a guy who like had something awful happen to him that was even worse for another person and the people who love her. But like, that this is not an antisocial behavior that has to be stopped and a person who needs to be caged. But like, that's the only solution that the criminal justice system offers, is like, make this person go away by putting them in a cage for the rest of their life at extraordinary expense to monetary expense to the government and taxpayers, but fuck taxpayers, and extraordinary emotional expense to the people they care about them, let alone the person themselves. Like, that's the only option.
There is the option, which is applied in lots of involuntary manslaughter cases, like particularly driving related ones, in specific states for specific people, which is that, there are people who get charged with involuntary manslaughter and get what is effectively like a fine or a bit of community service. But that is if you are somebody who has none of these compounding features that make you perceived as like a threat to society, like you're saying.
Right, you have to have lived your life in a way that can be perceived as upstanding.
Yep.
You have to be white.
Yep.
You have to be
no criminal record, probably
noble
employed.
Born, which means no criminal record means like from money.
Yes.
That's basically what that means.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect, and so basically the movie ends. He's not present at the reading of the verdict because his wife has the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And Toni Collette, the movie ends and he's like, there's this incredible scene of police cars with their sirens on going down the street. And he looks out the window because he wonders if this is when they come get him.
And it's implied like he's going to live the rest of his life feeling bad about what he does.
And he's like in the room with the baby. Yep. Like it's, yeah. And the end of the movie, there's a knock on the door. He opens the door. Toni Collette's there. We don't know what she's going to say. I
think it's that's not the question for me. I guess to me it was heavily implied that he is going to be prosecuted and that's the direction that this is going. I mean, it's not confirmed.
Well, but she doesn't show up with...
No, but I guess to me, the reason that I feel that is that the last conversation they had, he said, he basically said, do you think you can just let this go?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then she shows up again. So to me, that's sort of like the answer is no, she can't let it go. Which maybe right. I get that's not confirmed explicitly by the film, but I guess that's not where the uncertainty is.
Sure.
To me, the uncertainty is this like the right? How should we even feel about this? Should we feel excited by this? What does this mean to us?
Yeah, because it's not. We know what the consequences are.
Right.
And it's not fun to think about this family not having a father who's like doing so much more work to be a better person than 99% of people.
Yeah, I like that there's another thing the film plays down, like you're saying, is that he did some community service in the school where he met his wife and the kids are fond of him. Now he writes for like a lifestyle magazine. So he didn't...
Very Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Right. Oh, well, that's true. Yeah. Great point. But he didn't turn his life around and become like a hero.
No, he doesn't work at a soup kitchen, but he's just like, he doesn't drink anymore. Mm-hmm. And it seems like there are people in his life who are glad that he's around.
He seems to be like a good partner and he's,
he's, they also like another bit of the RB, or what did I say? The Wendy's drive-through realism in the film are, and I think, if in another director's hands, this would just seem like lazy screenwriting to me. But his jokes to her are like lame, but in a way that just feels realistic. Like he at one point says like he wants to have a great big orgy or big old orgy, and like they're both scandalized by this because I think I can imagine a couple in the suburbs of Savannah.
Oh yeah,
like mentioning the word orgy being like as blue as they ever get.
Right,
and like they're talking about she has your elbows or whatever. Like that's sort of.
I felt the same way. It is it was corny stuff. Yeah, in a way that felt like this is what their life would probably be like. Yeah, I felt exactly the same.
I do want to run down some things that I noticed.
Okay.
So Nicole, we've talked about this. He's the beast himself.
He's the beast himself, yeah.
He's the beast himself. J.K. Simmons is in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And very early in his career, I didn't realize this, he did some voice acting. And he appears in the animated film Anastasia.
Okay.
Which also stars Kelsey Grammer.
Okay. The other beast. The beast himself.
Zoe Deutsch.
Uh-huh.
She was in the 2022 film The Outfit with Johnny Flynn, that kind of handsome guy with the scar on his face, the British guy.
Sure. Yep.
And you know what movie he was in 2017? The film Beast.
Wow.
This is the Beast himself. Kiefer Sutherland, he does the voice of Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Which also features the voice talents of Hideyuki Tanaka.
Okay.
You might not know this about Hideyuki Tanaka. He also lent his voice to the 2011 anime miniseries version of X-Men as the Beast himself. Now, Nick Holt returning to him for one moment, you know that he was the star of the British teen series Skins.
Of course. First generation.
And you know that they did an American version of Skins for one season.
Yep, MTV.
Do you remember episode 3?
I never saw the American version.
It was entitled Chris.
Okay.
There's a character in that named Fat. I don't know what to tell you about that.
Okay.
He's played by the actor George Buza. Now, you may not recognize George Buza's face, but you certainly know his voice from X-Men the Animated Series, where he played the Beast himself. Francesca Eastwood's in the film.
Of course.
Clint Eastwood's daughter with Frances Fisher.
I think she did quite well. I mean, she doesn't have a huge part.
Yes. But. My famous podcast girlfriend made sure to note that in the scene where she's discovered dead by the guy who played the Latin man who gets pulled over in The Mule in that really good scene.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah.
So Francesca Eastwood, of course, the daughter of Clint Eastwood and Frances Fisher. Frances Fisher appeared in season 3, episode 4 of Sons of Anarchy with Ron Perlman, the Beast himself.
Oh, the Beast himself. Come on.
And then just one more for you. Cedric Yarborough.
Cedric,
is it Cedric?
Yep.
I'm sorry, Cedric. He does a few voice roles in Kung Fu Panda 4.
Okay.
Alongside someone who's not primarily an actor, Jimmy Donaldson. Mr. Beast himself.
Whoa, Mr. Beast himself.
So,
wow.
There's a lot going
Terrible
on here.
Terrible news that Mr. Beast is in Kung Fu Panda 4.
Yeah, he plays like a pig or something.
Yeah.
Which I guess that's in keeping. But,
right. Yeah.
If I were in keeping, I would him in his sleep.
Okay.
Bleep that out.
I mean, it's unlikely to ever be an innkeeper, so I don't know how much of a direct threat that is.
And I don't think he would stay at an inn. He's more of probably a hotel guy. Okay. So,
wow. You did a lot of noticing.
Thank you.
You noticed your third eye was open. I love it.
It sure was. Guess what color it is. So, the film, first of all, I think just fully lays bare how, even if the system is working the way it's intended, it's not going to get you to the truth. It's going to get you to something else because every man has his reasons.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
As Renoir told us. But specifically, the film just lays out like how jury duty is not just like selfishly, because in 12 Angry Men, you know, you have the Jack Warden character who like wants to get to the ball game.
He does. Yeah. And then you have the juror number 12. I forget the name of the actor, but the secret most frustrating character, the ad salesman guy who like doodles rice pops or whatever.
The handsome like doofus. Yeah. But that film, and also I don't know what the sort of compensation scheme was at that time. But this film doesn't lay out explicitly, but it makes it quite clear that this is an undue burden on the people asked to participate in the jury, like financially.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've read several pieces about that. I read about it before, unrelated to the film, because I was just curious. You
got numbers? I got some numbers too.
Yeah. People talk about how difficult it is.
You want to be Krumholtz and I'll be Morrow? Or no, okay. You should be Morrow. I'll be Krumholtz.
All right. Yeah.
More visibly Jewish.
Okay. Yeah. Get yourself some of those clear whiteboards and then you're going to be ready.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ian's recently found out about Windows. Doesn't know what they're called yet.
Yes. So you get the question of how much should we be paying these people, right? And obviously for some people, there are those whose employers match their normal pay or their normal salary for the time they're in jury duty. This is a minority of people.
This is not legally enforced.
Nope.
And the people, I would say generally the employers that do that, this is already like a Google type place where the person working there doesn't
probably could be paid minimum wage. Doesn't matter.
Financially successful. Yeah.
Yep.
I looked up Chatham County's jury compensation.
Okay.
That's where Savannah is.
Mm-hmm.
$30 a day.
$30 a day. Yes.
Now, the federal minimum wage, $7.25 an hour, 8 hours worked, it's $58.
Mm-hmm.
So we're below federal minimum wage. And also, this is, I was looking up, what happens if you miss jury duty in Chatham County? Big fine, possible jail time.
Yep.
So
now I'm going to reveal something on pod right now. I almost definitely have bench warrants for my arrest because I missed jury duty twice.
In California because you live in Mexico?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, god damn.
That much I could do about that. I meant to call, and that's the legal system. Sometimes you forget to call, and
so in California, I believe California is like the one state where you are not like you
held
won't
accountable.
go to jail.
Okay, great.
I think you might have some outstanding fines or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is from a Substack called Conflict Transformation.
Oh.
Like the rest of the criminal legal system, the punishment for missing jury duty disproportionately falls on people who are poor and people of color, who are less likely to have a permanent address to receive mail, less likely to have transportation, less likely to be able to miss work,
Cover
have a harder time
care.
finding and affording safe child and elder care, are more likely to be at risk of the worst symptoms of COVID. And the author of this had just recently gone through jury selection. She was not selected, but she says, in the face of these statistics, the clerk gave a lengthy speech about our civic duty and bragged with conviction. We just had a guy spend the weekend in jail because he skipped jury duty and then couldn't afford his bond.
Yeah, this is disgusting. But I mean, this is the concern, because what it incentivizes is, like you're saying, people who work for a place like Google, where first of all, their job is secure enough where you can ask for that time off and not expect repercussions. Because a heads up, even if you can't legally be fired for fulfilling your civic duty, you can definitely be punished at work in a way that nobody will ever be able to get,
Right. And you know what? We mentioned Google, which is a place where people would at least have like a fucked up Silicon Valley, like crypto libertarian kind of view of the world. Most likely you'd be like a guy who works at like an accounting firm owned by the 12th biggest Republican donor in the state.
Or you would be a retiree, which are also heavily favored.
Yes.
And these are not just retirees, but retirees who are not in a position to be doing unpaid child or elder care, which means they're probably from a decently wealthy background. So
or no one that wants to be around them.
Yep.
So they're bored and lonely. But if you're working minimum wage, you have all the incentive in the world to try to get the deliberation done as quickly as you can so you can go back to earning minimum wage.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's I have no issue with that being your number one goal, because you can't as ideal and beautiful and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington as the notion of the jury of 12 strangers deciding your fate impartially. There's no impartiality under capitalism. There's no impartiality where we're in, first of all, like, maybe you haven't heard about this case, but every TV show is about crime and every movie is about crime and how crime guys are bad and they all look the same.
Yeah.
And you also the state doesn't support your needs.
Yeah. So something like 5 to 7% of trial cases end in hung juries, which obviously, if you're thinking about the likelihood of a unanimous decision, seems very unlikely. Obviously, the case people make, the sort of pro-jury case, and I'm going to go a little bit Ezra Klein pro-jury in some aspects in a second here, but the case that people make is like, look, well, obviously they're presented with a certain amount of evidence, so the fact that they share this evidence means that it's not just going to be like a sort of statistical standard likelihood of, it being unusual for there to be a unanimous decision about something, because in some cases it's going to be so overwhelmingly obvious. Particularly the cases that go to trial, they go to trial usually because the prosecutor feels that the case is very clear, and also the person didn't take a plea bargain, or they offered a plea bargain that was so bad because they knew it was going to be such a slam dunk. So those are the arguments for why it's not surprising that there's so few hung juries. But there are so many studies about the normative pressure of agreeing with people, in parts, like you're saying, because people will offer, and they offer it in 12 Angry Men, they offer it in this film, the idea like, hey, we have to get out of here. I need to get back to my life. I need to take care of my kids. I need to go drive my bus. I have baseball tickets, whatever. There's a pressure to think, okay, well,
my boss can't fire me, but like, he'll probably up the sexual harassment and then give me
the worst possible schedule where I don't get to see my kids for like 6 months or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just be shitty to me, which in a way that's like not legally actionable, but miserable. Just ruins my life. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's also incredible. So in something like, there was one study that I read where in half of court cases, one jury member just never spoke. So there's like a lot of pressure, whether it's
Clarence
because of
Thomas
principle.
Yes,
exactly. Whether it's like, what they call social loafing, sort of like group project effect of like, well, these people are just going to figure it out and I'll just be around. Or it's because of the like minority conformity pressure that these people face, which is like, if you are the Henry Fonda, if you are the Nicholas Hoult, it's actually very unlikely statistically that you will hold out and say, I really think that I'm confident that this is like, there's something up here.
And the term minority here refers to like statistically in the minority.
I do. I am referring to that. But there is also the fact that people in certain or from certain backgrounds also face a higher pressure because they're often seen as like the token representative for these communities. I mean, in 12 Angry Men, they have the I forget the name of that actor, even though he's wonderful. The one who is from like he says a slum background that grew up in slums.
Jack Klugman.
Yes,
he plays Oscar Madison in the Odd Couple TV show. He's
that's
the
right.
Walter Matthau of the So they have a guy like the most Jewish looking white guy in the room full of white guys. It's like, I'm from that same slum.
Yes, exactly. And I think we have a mix of those characters in Justin Kemp and also the Cedric Yarborough character, which is sort of like, I understand what it's like for people to think that you can't change, or I understand what it's like to be from an underprivileged background.
Right. We haven't even talked about the the domestic violence angle, so we'll talk about this. Yeah. But also, I really appreciate that the film lays out. First, we hear from Messina or maybe we hear from Sutherland the disparity in resources between the DA, the prosecutor, and the public defender. The number of cases is smaller. They have more money to work with, and it's impossible to be impartial in this type of a situation. And then we hear later from Killebrew that resources are stretched thin for her. So like, there's simply no reconciling this ideal system with like financial realities in a way that does anything but incentivize like a shittier result, worse, like basically a lower likelihood of correctness, moral correctness, and the film is like not hiding this from us at all.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that, I mean, exactly what you're saying is supported by the idea that the prosecutors have a financial incentive to get pleas. Public defenders also have an incentive to get pleas, not even financial, but first of all, because of their caseload, and also because, I mean, you're basically facing whatever the name is of like a one-person prisoner's dilemma, where you can take, for example, 2 to 5, or you can go to court and face the possibility of like 25 years and 22 years before you have the possibility of parole or something. Yeah. So,
or you get out of there scot-free and like clear your name and technically clear your name, but like that's a gamble. It's gambling. That's
what I mean. And if you were being told like, look, the prosecutors have enough evidence where, first of all, the judge, I think it's like 4-1 in terms of where judges come from. 4 of them have a DA background compared to 1 having like a public defender style background. So you're facing the circumstance where you're probably going to lose. I mean, 2 years, people, this is like a real conversation people will have with their clients is to say, hey, 2 years, you're back, you're with your family, you can continue your life. If it's 22 years, sort of. Of course, it's not really that.
You have a conviction. Yeah,
maybe you can't get a job anymore, can't get public housing, whatever. But
and who knows what's going to happen to you in prison, which is a horrible place to be.
Yep.
Because of the guards, and then the trickle down effect of like the people running the prison into the behavior of the people who are incarcerated.
Yeah, and being the largest housing area for untreated mental illness, whatever, right? But if you're told the story you're told is 2 years versus 22 years,
like downtown Oaxaca, and there's one specific
address,
metal doored sort of enclosed hallway. But, the second is
versus 22 years where you could say you're going to miss your kid's entire like childhood and you're not going to see any of it. Yeah. So which would you take, even if you know that you're innocent?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's this thing totally like adjacent to truth. It's a system that that sort of has its own type of output that is not related to what's real.
Yep.
And I mean, even the language of it kind of reminded me of what we were talking about with Sight and Sound Ballot. many months ago, because of course everything is related to movies. I don't leave the house, but like the notion of guilty or not guilty, guilt or innocence is like not really what's going on here because of the way that it's structured. You have to, what you're really deciding on is whether the specific case put forward has proven them guilty or not proven them guilty. And so that's when you get into this room where like all 11 of these people look at this guy and think this guy is guilty, like metaphysically, like spiritually guilty of violating social norms. And like, this is the thing, Al Capone tax evasion style, like this is what we got him on.
Yes.
But like, this is they see this, like with the Cedric Yarborough character, like see this as a, this is the opportunity to get the guy for the stuff that he got away with. And so
even if you don't think prison is an awful place, then you're thinking, well, we got to get this guy off the streets. We might not have another chance. And that's how it's presented to you. Yeah. It's like, well, this guy's going to be at your grocery store if you guys don't convict him.
This guy could be dating your teenage daughter and he's going to break every single one of those 8 rules. So, I mean, just incredible that Clint casts his own daughter as the mutilated corpse. Yeah. Oh, but did I say what Amanda said about Francesca?
You did. Yeah. Didn't you?
Clint made sure to make it look like she has a great big ass.
Oh, no, you didn't.
Yeah. I think she said a fat ass, actually. Okay. Which is funny because if you follow Francesca Eastwood on Instagram, you would know that she is dangerously underweight, and I hope that she is doing okay. Anyway.
I mean, look, we can call that weird, but also I guess if my parent were directing me in a film, I would want them to make me look hot.
Yeah. I'm thinking about your dad directing a movie with the 6 boys, and maybe you're all in like, it's like White Squall, I guess.
Okay. Great.
You would be the hero on an island, I think. Of your brothers?
That's nice of you to say. I don't know if that's true. I just imagine
you have a lot of the applicable skills and experience, because a lot of them would be, they're probably great in a database querying situation. But when it comes to building shelter, I feel like it's Ian's time to shine, finally.
I have thought about how proud I would be for one of them to be in a situation where they needed to ask me to construct them a foundation for their Adobe home.
I need a lean-to.
Right.
Quick. Yeah. But let's see. Francesca has a fat ass. What are we talking about? Looks like she does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy that he thinks this movie is like a, the system isn't like perfect, but it's the best we got.
Yeah.
When I see this movie as like an incredible,
the best version is really bad.
Just like, it's not working. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you, but it's a bunch of work that produces results that are unrelated to what's right.
Yeah. And here's where I said I was going to defend the jury system a tiny bit. I did read some studies. If you make the jury smaller, you do get more people speaking, which is great, but you also increase the likelihood they're going to make a poor decision because there's just fewer people involved, right? Mm-hmm. Which is the same problem with not having a jury at all. Like the country I live in now has no jury system. You just have judges, and a single person is so corruptible, either literally or just like in spirit. Well, and
that's what makes it sound better than England or whatever, like the shit that the people who came to North America were so religiously extreme that they got kicked out of 17th century Europe. But it's better than just like whoever the king appoints, and same with having the ability to elect a DA or whatever. But then you have all of the problems that come with elections.
Yep.
The money involved, the sort of running to the middle or often to the right. And there's to sort of talk about the domestic violence angle. The Toni Collette character repeatedly says that a guilty verdict in this case is going to indicate to women in the community that like the system has their backs against abusive men, and this is borne out by the statements of a few of the people in the jury as well. And like
basically the people on the jury say something to the effect of, I know a guy like this, or I've known guys like this, guys who, they treat you poorly and that there's never any
consequence.
Yes, accountability for that.
And of course, goes without saying for, I think, the listeners of this show, but you're so much more likely to suffer domestic violence if you are in the family of a police officer.
Yep.
Also, domestic violence is like 31% of domestic violence cases are reported or something like that.
Yeah.
It's extremely underreported, I think, because people know that there's the combination of it's a risk to you because it may very well not result in you being protected from this person.
May result in violence against you.
Retaliatory violence. Yep. You're also calling the domestic abusers on a domestic abuser.
Yep.
And then there's that will only even like maybe work if you are a Justin Kemp style well-to-do white person, because overwhelmingly women of color are less believed by the police, and then compound this with the diminished likelihood of believing domestic violence claims. And then there's the whole situation, the whole problem of women of color defending themselves against domestic violence who are then punished for it. Yep. So you have Survived and Punished is an organization that Mariam Kaba is involved with, hero of the show, Mariam Kaba.
Yes.
That formed specifically around the case of Marissa Alexander, who was a woman in Florida whose husband, she said that her husband attacked her. Her husband with a history of domestic violence, her estranged husband, threatened to kill her. She had a gun that she fired into the ceiling as a warning shot, specifically in Florida, Stand Your Ground, Florida. Trayvon Martin, Florida.
Yep.
So she fired a shot that did not harm anyone to say, like, don't mess with me. She was arrested, and a jury deliberated for 12 minutes before finding her guilty. She was sentenced. She received a mandatory minimum sentence, a whole other thing. A mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in prison, which she did not end up serving most of, thanks to the tireless work of abolitionists.
Incredible. Yeah.
Angela Corey, the state attorney, who offered her a shitty plea deal and was broadly criticized for her handling of the case. Angela Corey also brought in assigned by Rick Scott to investigate the shooting death of Trayvon Martin. So her application of the Stand Your Ground thing seems
extremely inconsistent. Yes.
Yeah. But then also, as the Toni Collette character's situation shows, because as a result of this specific case, she lost re-election. In the Republican primary for the Attorney General, she lost by a 38-point margin. This is not Attorney General, so the prosecutor, whatever.
I know what you mean. Yeah, this. You sort of mentioned it earlier, but the weirdness of saying, on the one hand, I'd probably better to have people that we can hold accountable electorally and say, we are looking for certain qualities, and if you can't demonstrate those qualities consistently, we as a collective want to have the power to remove you from that position. But
yes,
also just insane, because as any electoral politics go, we know that this just becomes a race of proving for Republicans that you're tough on crime, and for Democrats that you are tough / kind on crime, basically, that you are addressing it with both the police and social services.
You're
but not just social services.
You're acknowledging some of the systemic problems that have been identified by activists about 40 years prior to whenever you're running. Literally.
But also still making sure that they're not going to ever see a broken window or something.
Exactly. And so in the last decade or so, obviously building on decades and decades of work, but in the last decade or so, there's been a growth of what's called abolition feminism, which is the intersection of movements to abolish and dismantle and reimagine what justice for people who have social norms broken against them. I'm trying very hard not to use the word crime.
Yeah.
But abolition movements to get rid of prisons, get rid of the cops, these systems that only harm people, do not solve any problems. This often runs up against mainstream feminism's sort of totally understandable desire to see rapists and domestic abusers and harmers of women punished and removed from society.
And those are even two different impulses, both of which I understand. But the second one being much more important. And obviously, again, I don't want to get into specifics, but there are situations I've encountered in my life where I understand very clearly why you want to be able to call somebody to say, hey, this woman, this child is being harmed. We need to get this person who is harming them away from this person until we figure out how to help them assess their behavioral issues, assess their substance abuse issues, assess their lifelong exposure to abuse themselves, whatever created this type of person. But what I think you're getting at, and I'll let you cook here in a second, but the question is, first of all, is this doing anything in the long term? In the short term, I see the appeal. Is this doing anything in the long term to change those people who have committed acts of abuse? And much more importantly, I think, is it doing anything to decrease the likelihood that somebody else will end up the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and obviously I'm not an abolition feminist expert, and I've not done any of the enormous work and like big old books, and there's people who have spent their whole lives like saying really smart things about these things. So check out Mariame Kaba, check out Ruth Wilson Gilmore, check out the book Abolition Feminism. Don't listen to me. But briefly, some of the problems that come up is like, what do we do about rapists is the number one, like, okay, you want to defund and you want to abolish the police state. I think it's like
Mariame Kaba has probably fielded this question like 30 times in interviews that I've read alone.
And so first of all, if we highlight even like the sort of, we can call them successful removals of a person who is who hurts women, if we remove this person from society, you've given a point to the exact same system that shoots unarmed black and brown men in the back. Like this is like,
there aren't two systems.
It's PR for the cops. Then also there's just the fact of the police state like doesn't help these women.
Yeah.
It's not resolving any of the systems that would, socialize men not to know how to express their emotions, doesn't resolve the system that puts pressures on people to work too hard and blow off steam by drinking too much, blow off steam, get angry at their boss and then take it out on their fucking kids.
It doesn't help women who are in positions of financial dependence that often find themselves vulnerable to all sorts of situations.
I mean,
like
it's
this.
crazy how this movie is such a terrific encapsulation of why capitalism and the police state and cars are all really bad, and we have to get rid of all of them because, like, I think it's hard to imagine the level of substance abuse that Americans deal with as being nearly as bad as it is if we had social safety net and everyone's needs met. There's just fewer things to drink about. Obviously, substance abuse will still exist for various reasons, but we can deal with it with like trained healthcare professionals. And
I was about to say also the sort of beautiful positive reciprocal effect of addressing mental health issues, which lead to substance abuse, which lead to worse mental health issues.
Exactly. And if there's like an option for people who transgress these social norms, whether accidentally in the Justin Kemp case or deliberately, quote unquote, deliberately in the case of James Scythe, like in his past, if there's an option that isn't let them go or put them in a cage or like kill them with electricity, then these pressures, these weird pressures that put everyone on the jury in this impossible position, those go away. Like if we have other ways of helping to redirect people.
To me, that's the big answer to why doesn't the jury system work. It's because those are the options that they're presented with. I actually might be on board. As many failings as there are with all types of democracy, there will always be mistakes. There will always be unfair punishments or unfair votes or self-sabotage.
Shows us by two philosopher kings.
Yes.
I'm one of the philosopher kings. My name is Jake Circle. We should be in charge. Put us in charge.
Exactly. I mean, this is the reason that you can say that there's these problems with democracy, but philosopher king version, not really realistic. So
yeah, what else do we do? Yeah, but that doesn't mean we stop trying to figure out what else we do.
Yeah, or to be able to say, let's present those fallible democracies with some options that might optimize their ability to help these people still.
Yeah. I mean, in your readings, what do you see as some of the solutions that might negate the dynamite dramatic tension of the film? Juror number 2.
I don't know if you're using the word dynamite intentionally, but
you want to blow up the courthouse? You want to blow up the Savannah, the Chatham County courthouse?
Not necessarily what I'm saying.
You have plans to do that? You have the equipment?
I wanted to talk about dynamite charges, which is just more of like an addendum to what you were talking about, which is basically a decision that the U.S. Supreme Court made a long time ago to let prosecutors basically, if there's a deadlocked jury, to go and say, hey, you guys need to keep deliberating until you figure this out. So sort of basically like not accept a deadlocked jury until they really say that there's no chance that they'll remove it forward. But a judge can go and talk to a dissenting juror like they're talking about kind of in this film. So they can talk to a specific person and say, the quote is, a dissenting juror should consider whether his doubt was a reasonable one, which made no oppression upon many men equally honest as himself. This is from 1896, but this is why it's men only.
Yeah.
But the judge could literally say, hey, don't you think it's weird you're the only person who disagrees with the other 11 guys?
Right. Don't you want to be like everybody else?
Right.
You don't want to be a weird guy.
Very aggressive. Really, what he's saying. Very
I'm
crazy.
the judge.
Yeah.
I have half of mine to start looking into some of your behavior based on. Yeah. I mean, there's no real impartiality or democracy at work here.
Yeah, and that's, the other thing that I wanted to bring up very quickly, which of course we've talked about before. I don't want to belabor the points, but I'm pretty sure I've quoted the exact statistic that 77% of Americans polled like every year in like the last 40 years have said that crime is getting worse in this country. So those are the people you're bringing into your juror democracy, is people who 3/4 of them think that kids these days, society is falling apart, barbarians at the gates, things aren't like they used to be, whatever. Mm-hmm. Some variation of this, right? Which I think we also get in 12 Angry Men. I forget if it's the Lee Cobb character. Somebody said, it is him, because he says like, when I was a kid, I called my dad sir.
But he like the character with the shaved head guy, the muscle guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's like estranged from his kid.
Yeah,
doesn't see his kid enough. So like that's sort of at work here. And like I remember having a conversation. I was trapped in a conversation with this woman who was telling me that she like hated George Gaskin, who was the DA in LA, who had been
the sort of representative reform DA who was looking to decrease like minimum sentencing, was looking for more off ramps before
I promised to prosecute at least one cop a year, like that kind of reform. Yeah. She was furious about Gaskin because she had 2 adult children, maybe a child and a nephew or something, die from overdoses, and Gaskin wasn't gonna like put the people away who sold fentanyl to her children. And on the one hand, I understand the pain and wanting to do something about it, but like that's not gonna bring people back. It's gonna cause further emotional misery for the people who are incarcerated and the people who love them, because every fentanyl dealer is someone's kid. Yep. Who has found themselves in this situation because of the circumstances of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I get the rage, but like this is the only option we have is like, it's as if you go to the pharmacy and no matter the problem that you have, they give you a loaded gun.
Right. I mean, yes.
I have allergies. Here's a Glock.
Perfect. I got you. Yeah, I got that covered. One of the things I wanted to say is that we're often sort of harder on liberals on this show. And, I wonder I imagine most of our audience understands why that is. But right-wing people who don't see it as an acceptable option to fund welfare programs, because they will never see that as an acceptable option, their stance is actually more consistent to me, which is like, look, I know that maybe the best way to reduce crime would be to, like you're saying, satisfy people's needs, change family environments, treat mental health problems. But I don't want to pay for that. That's not a reasonable consideration for me. So I'm going to use the only system that I do think is acceptable, even though it's often more expensive to do that. And I think there's actually like research about the millions
extremely
that are saved.
More expensive. Yeah, it costs so much more to house a person in a prison than to provide them with like free permanent supportive housing.
Or like breakfast programs in elementary school and whatever else. But even if there's a sort of twisted logic to saying, I'm never going to help people directly. I do want to see less crime, so I'm going to punish them as brutally as possible. Whatever. I can sort of set that aside. It's the ostensibly left-wing people who say, I get that these people are products of their environment, but we also have to do something. And the solution is just, okay, let's do a bunch of stuff that just straight up has never worked historically, doesn't work on paper.
There's just no evidence that it would do anything but waste money. Yeah. I
mean, Colorado, the two big like reverse reforms, like reactionary responses in ballot measures. We had California Prop 36. People who don't live in California maybe don't know, but this was the ability to prosecute more crimes as felonies, to be able to sentence people to longer sentences. And a very similar thing in Colorado, Prop 128, was specifically talking about like violent criminals have to serve 85% of their sentences before coming up for parole. And I will tell you, longer sentences is like one of the most researched and rejected responses to crime that we have. Like one of the things we're most confident about is that increasing the length of people's sentences doesn't really help for two primary reasons. One, people who commit crimes don't think about the length of their possible sentence. They maybe think about the likelihood of them being caught. That's often discussed, but they don't really think about like, is it 5 years? Is it 30 years? Right. Two, very fast. Most criminals are people between the ages of 18 and 25. And a lot of what is achieved when we have longer sentences reducing recidivism is that they just age into a different group that's less likely to commit crimes anyway. So
right.
Neither of these things are really related to like preventing crime, doing what you're trying to achieve.
I don't know. My eyes have turned black and rolled back into my head, and I'm overcome with the urge to just interject and say, well, of course they don't want to hear any of these statistics, conservatives and liberals, because that's why the book is called The New Jim Crow. This is just like a new system for punishing and subjugating and removing from sight and like interaction the black population of the United States, with a little bit of like, what do we do about like a really bad white guy we can't like ignore? You know?
I mean, I think it's obviously you and I both agree that this is the case, that it's motivated by racial animus, as weird people like to say, non-addressing phrase.
That's the Assassin's Creed game that they didn't end up releasing. So here, for my girlfriend who's listening, in the Assassin's Creed game, there's a machine called the Animus, and that's how the guy. First of all, those games
relives your
take
ancestors.
place now. And there's a guy in Montreal who has to go into basically a tanning bed that sends his mind back to his ancestor, who lives in one of a number of very captivating historical moments where he used to be an assassin.
But somehow you're like still making decisions. It's pretty hard to parse.
I guess they are kind of racial animus, because like he gets sent back to like whatever Syria in like 1102, right? I mean, he's a guy from Montreal. Anyway, sorry.
No.
Racial animus is animating.
Yeah, I mean, but even if we look at it as class warfare, or however you want to characterize it, to me, it doesn't really change the underlying principle, which is that you think there are people who are a threat to society. There may be some statistical evidence that they commit crimes at a higher rate. It's almost never the rate at which you're incarcerating them, which is always going to be disproportionately higher. But and setting aside questions of like wage theft outweighing all other types of property theft, whatever, right? We know these things. But if we just say, look, crime is down compared to when we tried to make crime laws a little bit less draconian, and now we're deciding they need to be draconian again, even though things have actually gotten better in terms of crime. And
well, the thing that's defined as crime is down, because wage theft,
of course, we should always say,
and, social murder, way up.
Yes, yeah. But then the question is sort of like, what are we trying to do? You're trying to make yourself feel safer. You know, there are questions of visible homelessness being up. Well, you and I have discussed what maybe needs to be addressed to.
A jury just found the murderer of Jordan Neely not guilty, a few days before we recorded this.
Exactly.
So the jury system, you were saying you like the jury system?
Yeah. Well, look, that's a great way to wrap this up, at least the point I'm making here, which is to say, why is, if people don't feel that's murder, then maybe the question isn't about like whether it's a crime that you just think of as being an abstract crime, and more about, do you feel threatened? Do you walk into CVS and see that they had their windows broken, and you watch a PBS NewsHour and they say that in San Francisco, 1 in 10 people have their car broken into every year or something, and you think, I can't believe this never happened to me when I was a kid, and then you
right. And I also hate everyone who lives in San Francisco,
exactly.
And I hope bad things happen to them, but I'm also scared about the bad things happening to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And then your answer is just, I need to do something that I can see the results of within a single election cycle, which is almost never going to be the social system way of addressing the problem. Because if you go fund schools, you go fund family education, you go fund mental health services, optimistically, we're talking about like 8 to 10 years or something before you really see that. And this is where having these short electoral cycles or people motivated by like short-term improvements is also pretty self-sabotaging. Because I straight up don't know of a way that you can improve crime without it being just like throw everybody who's ever committed a crime in jail in the course of 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, the show is about, that's beautifully put, the show is about how the films of Clint Eastwood speak to their moment in this one. It's one moment. We only have one moment going on here. The 94-year-old man has his finger on the fucking pulse, the rapidly fading pulse of the American empire. And we barely got into the unceremonious dumping of this film.
Yeah, I know.
I would like to sum this whole thing up with a brief visit to the Pinecone Crime Zone.
Oh, wow. A main feed visit. Okay.
One item visit.
Attention, scumbag. You are now entering the Pinecone Crime Zone. No, you can't see my badge number.
Pinecone Crime Zone is a segment of the show where we check in with the Carmel Pinecone newspaper. This is the newspaper of Carmel by the Sea, California, the sleepy town on the Monterey Peninsula where Clint Eastwood has made his home for now going on 170 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just one item from the Sheriff's Log section, the October 25th edition. Here's a little crime for you. November 1st edition, not in the archive.
Oh, weird.
Link goes nowhere. What's going on?
Crime.
What are they hiding? Anyway, so in Pacific Grove on like October something or other, a subject was observed trying vehicle door handles in a parking lot on Ocean View Boulevard. The subject was located and arrested for various charges, including the manufacture or sale of large capacity magazines, petty theft, public intoxication, in parentheses, toluene, loitering, and vehicle tampering. The 19-year-old male was transported to county jail. So we've got hidden in here. This guy was trying door handles. Also, apparently manufacturing large capacity magazines for like machine guns.
Mm-hmm.
And was also hidden in there, intoxicated on toluene, which is a
paint thinner or something?
An industrial solvent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you're 19 and you're huffing industrial solvent to get high, and you're somehow both capable of manufacturing machine gun magazines, but you also are so desperate for, one presumes, change that you're trying door handles. Like, the crime here is not, this guy didn't start this.
Nope.
And the system only has one thing to do for this guy, which is to arrest him and take him to county jail, and presumably he'll get sent to something worse later. And like, this is a 19-year-old, you know?
Yeah. I mean, be induced into more antisocial, quote unquote, behavior because the system as it exists is going to make him feel really bad.
You know what I have to say about this system? It's of a down.
It's of a big down.
It's of a big old down.
Yeah.
And God bless Clint Eastwood. God bless Juror number 2. Great film. So glad it's good.
Me too. I mean, look, I honestly felt while watching the film, we discussed the oddness of him making this big swan song film and then doing this. This one felt more like, this is like peak Clint Eastwood to me. This is like he's like firing on
film.
All cylinders. Yeah.
So I mean, it's youthful in its sort of exuberance, but it's also clearly the work of someone who's like experienced a lot of the world. So it's not like a, like a Boogie Nights or something. Like it's this thing rips.
Yeah.
Hope he's got 6 more in him. I hope they call them all his last film, and I hope he beats Manuel de Oliveira's record for being the oldest guy to ever make a movie or whatever.
I think that would be terrific. And I think, Clint Eastwood, keep making movies where it seems like you maybe have listened to an episode where we talked about confirmation bias, and then you make a movie where some people say, this could be confirmation bias.
And then someone else says, you just heard that on a podcast.
Right. Yeah.
His next movie is going to be called, what's something else we talk about? His next movie is going to be called The Speed Force. Anyway, we get fingers crossed.
We probably have one more episode coming out this calendar year, which is going to be our Oh Canada episode.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your patience as we waited for Ian to be able to see the fucking movie.
Thank you so much,
on
everybody.
Claro Video.
Yep.
And remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review. It helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad.
Not to stereotype, but your dad's going to love this movie, and he might love us talking about the show
and
too.
He might learn. Your dad might learn from the movie.
Yeah.
This is an important film.
That's right.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pod Casty For Me if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a 2-person Steven Soderbergh podcast. You can email us at podcastingforme@gmail.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. And just as a reminder, because this is an up to the minute podcast, but an up to the minute movie. Jury nullification is your right as a juror to acquit someone, even if you think they have committed the crime. You do not have to find them guilty if, for example, you find the law to be unjust or you find the crime itself to have been justified. For example, just pulling out of a hat, if someone kills someone who deserved to die.
Seemed like they maybe indirectly killed a bunch of other people. Yeah. And also, like you just said, it's an important part of all these films, and yet, based on the studies that I read, people are not making decisions based on reasonable doubt, saying it just feels like there's just not enough evidence for me to be very confident that this was the person. So even if you think it was maybe the person, that's actually enough to say not guilty.
Yep, exactly.
Give it a shot.
Give it a shot. Hey, give it a shot.
In every sense. Yeah.
That is the end of the episode. Bye.
Bye.